By 1939, Germany had the most powerful military machine in Europe, thousands of tanks, a modern air force built from scratch, a navy being reconstructed in plain sight, millions of soldiers trained, equipped, and ready. Here's the part nobody talks about. Germany was completely, catastrophically broke when they built it. Not running a deficit broke, not stretched thin broke. We are talking about a country that, by conservative estimates, was spending 4 to 5 times more than it was actually collecting in tax revenue. A country whose military budget, by 1938, exceeded its entire national income. A country that, on paper, should have collapsed before a single tank crossed a single border. And yet the tanks rolled anyway. So how do you build the most expensive war machine in modern history when you have no money to pay for it? The answer is one of the most audacious, reckless, and genuinely creative financial frauds ever pulled off by a government in peacetime. And understanding it tells you something deeply uncomfortable about how power actually works. Let us go back to 1933. Adolf Hitler takes power in January. Germany is a wreck. The Great Depression has hammered the country. Unemployment is sitting at roughly 30%. The Weimar Republic's economy never fully recovered from World War I reparations, hyperinflation, and the crash of 1929. The treasury is empty. Public confidence is shattered. And yet, Hitler has made an enormous promise. He told the German people he would restore their greatness. That meant jobs. That meant infrastructure. That meant, above all, rearmament. A military so powerful that no one would ever humiliate Germany again. The problem was simple and devastating. You cannot rearm a nation without money. And Germany had none. Enter Hjalmar Schacht. If Hitler was the face of the Third Reich's ambition, Schacht was the engine underneath it. A brilliantly unconventional economist and the head of Germany's central bank, Schacht understood something that most people miss about modern economics. Money, in many ways, is a story. It is a shared agreement. And if you control the machinery behind that agreement, you can stretch it in ways that look like magic, at least for a while. Schacht's solution was called the MEFO bill system, and it was, in the most neutral possible sense, a masterpiece of creative accounting. Here is how it worked. The German government needed to pay arms manufacturers. Krupp, for example, was building artillery. Junkers was building aircraft. But the government could not just hand them cash, because the government did not have cash. And it could not print money openly, because the last time Germany did that, in the early 1920s, a wheelbarrow of banknotes could not buy a loaf of bread. That memory was burned into every German alive. So Schacht invented a ghost company. He created a fictional corporation called Metallurgische Forschungsgesellschaft, or MEFO for short. This company had no factory, no product, no employees to speak of. It existed entirely on paper, but it could issue bills, essentially short-term I owe us, and those bills were backed by the German government and accepted by the Reichsbank, Germany's central bank. So the process went like this. The government tells Krupp to build 500 artillery pieces. Krupp builds them. Instead of receiving payment in Reichsmarks, Krupp receives MEFO bills, bills they can hold, trade, or cash in at any bank. The bills circulate like money, they feel like money, but they do not show up in the official government budget. They are hidden off the books. It was deficit spending disguised as private finance. And for 5 years, it worked brilliantly. Between 1933 and 1938, Germany spent roughly 35 billion Reichsmarks on rearmament, a staggering number. For context, that is roughly equivalent to several $100 billion today. And the vast majority of ordinary Germans had no idea how it was being funded. Foreign observers had no clear picture either. The books were opaque by design. Meanwhile, the results were visible to everyone. Unemployment collapsed. Roads were being built. Factories were humming. The German military was growing at a pace that made the rest of Europe deeply nervous, and in some capitals, deeply envious. This is where it gets psychologically interesting. When an economy appears to be working, people stop asking uncomfortable questions. Businesses took the MEFO bills because they trusted the government would eventually make them good. Banks accepted them. Workers got paid. Nobody wanted to look behind the curtain because what they saw in front of it looked like a miracle. Hitler understood this instinctively. He repeatedly told his generals something that sounded insane but turned out to be strategically coherent. He told them Germany could not sustain this level of spending, that the economy would crack, probably by 1939 or 1940 at the latest, that the MEFO bills would come due, that the inflation monster would wake up. His solution was not to stop spending. His solution was to conquer someone before the bill came due. Read that again, because it is genuinely extraordinary. The military buildup was not the preparation for expansion. The expansion was the plan to pay for the buildup. Germany needed to seize foreign assets, raw materials, gold reserves, and industrial capacity fast enough to cover the debts it was accumulating. The whole thing was a high-speed financial Ponzi scheme dressed up in nationalist ideology. And this is where the irony sits at its most uncomfortable. The Third Reich's early military successes, Austria in 1938, Czechoslovakia's Sudetenland later that year, Czechoslovakia itself in 1939, these were not just political victories, they were financial lifelines. When Germany absorbed Austria, it seized the Austrian national gold reserves. When it took Czechoslovakia, it seized the Czech National Bank's gold and one of the most sophisticated arms industries in Europe. The Skoda works alone transformed Germany's tank production capacity almost overnight. Each conquest bought time. Each annexed country was stripped of assets that helped paper over the mounting domestic debt. The Wehrmacht was being partially funded by the countries it was defeating. By the time World War II formally began in September 1939, Germany's financial situation was not actually better than it had been in 1933. In some ways, it was worse. The MEFO bills were being quietly wound down because they could not be hidden indefinitely. Schacht himself had grown increasingly alarmed and was eventually pushed out of his position in 1937 and later imprisoned. Even the architect of the scheme wanted off the ride. But momentum is a powerful thing. And by 1939, the machine was moving too fast to stop. Here is where the story pivots into something larger than Germany or World War II or the 1930s. What Schacht and Hitler discovered, or perhaps rediscovered, is that a government's true credit limit is not set by its balance sheet. It is set by confidence, by the willingness of enough people to believe, at least for now, that the numbers add up. Modern governments run deficits constantly. They issue debt. They print money. They engage in quantitative easing. The mechanics are more sophisticated and usually far less sinister than the MEFO system, but the underlying principle rhymes uncomfortably. When confidence holds, the system holds. When confidence breaks, everything breaks at once. Germany's confidence held long enough to rebuild a military from scratch, launch a world war, and conquer most of Western Europe in 6 weeks. The eventual collapse came not from the financial recklessness alone, but from the moment the military machine ran into adversaries it could not defeat fast enough to keep funding itself. By 1941, invading the Soviet Union was not merely an ideological decision, it was a desperate financial one. Germany needed Soviet oil, grain, and industrial capacity. Without them, the scheme unraveled. And it did unravel, slowly and then all at once, over the next 4 years. The military Germany could never afford ultimately cost the world somewhere between 70 and 85 million lives. So here's the question worth sitting with. If a government can build something genuinely impossible through a combination of financial engineering, propaganda, suppressed dissent, and borrowed time, what does that tell us about the relationship between economic reality and political will? Was Germany's miracle real, or was it always an illusion with a body count attached to the bill? Because the numbers never actually lied. They were just hidden. And history has a way of making you pay eventually with interest.